This video will show you how to use Microsoft Excel to figure out all of the values and graphs that you need to complete your first Excel assignment in Econ 261. So this lab is looking at some hypothetical data from the bread and butter bakery, and we're saying that they collected some data over a 3-week period looking at the number of each different type of loaf of bread that was sold. And the point of this is to try to figure out how to make some projections about how much bread they should have in stock for each day of the week. So make sure that you save your work in this actual document that you're going to be working from, in the actual assignment, the Word document. Also, make sure that you follow through with everything I'm doing in Excel and save that sheet as well, because you will be turning in both the Word document and the Excel sheet that you're working from. So let's go ahead and take a look at the data that you're going to be working with, and a link to this file is available in the same place that you found this assignment. So just to give you guys a summary of how to interpret this raw data, the columns here represent each different type of bread that's sold at the bakery, and then each different day of the week is represented along each row. Keep in mind that data collection took place over 3 weeks, so we have 3 of each day in the data set. Just to give you an idea of how to interpret the numbers, for example, if I looked at this 496, that means that on this particular Sunday, they sold 496 loaves of white bread. Just another example, if I look at this 316 in the bottom right corner, on a particular Saturday during the data collection period, they sold 316 loaves of light oat bread. So just to let you know how to interpret the data in its raw form. But although it's nice that we have some data and it's organized pretty well, we can't make a whole lot of conclusions when the data is presented in this way. So this assignment will walk you through how to present the data in more effective ways so you can make decisions based on it. So for number 1, you are going to be creating a joint frequency bar graph that will summarize the number of sales for each day of the week. So a joint frequency bar graph, 2 variables, day of the week, and the type of bread sold. So we're going to be creating that now. So one of the most useful tools in Microsoft Excel for these kinds of analyses are pivot tables, and that's what we are going to be using for this entire assignment. So to start to get a pivot table to summarize your data, go up to the Insert tab, select Pivot Table. Now, it automatically selected all of my data, and that's great. If it doesn't, you can just click the left mouse button, hold down, and drag down and all the way over to select all the data. Also make sure that New Worksheet is checked. Click OK. I'm going to go ahead and label this sheet. So just right-click this tab, go to Rename. I'm going to label this Bar, because we're going to be creating a joint frequency bar chart. Okay, so I'm here. Make sure you're highlighted there. Just click all of the different variables over here. And Microsoft Excel is pretty smart. It knows that you are trying to count the number of loaves of bread for each day of the week in our data set based on what type of loaf we're looking at. So just to break this down, across all 3 Sundays in the data set, 1,292 loaves of white bread were sold. Across all of the days in our data set, 12,819 loaves of white bread were sold in total. Okay, so the point is to look at a joint frequency bar graph. So to get that, you can just go up to Pivot Chart, make sure that the Pivot Table Tools is there and Options is selected, and then select Pivot Chart. We want to use this clustered column, so make sure that's selected, then click OK. And just automatically, it gives me exactly what I was looking for, which is great. So I'm just going to enlarge this by clicking on the corner when the little white double-sided arrow pops up, and then just dragging out to make it larger. I did that for 2 reasons, so that you can see the bars more easily, and so that the full key is presented to you. So this just tells you which color bar corresponds to which type of bread. Now before you paste this into your Excel document, make sure that you label the X and the Y axis. So to do that, one of the easiest ways to do it is to just choose a layout that already has those axes labeled. So let's see. This one doesn't. That one doesn't. I'm not liking any of these. Oh, this one looks good. There we go. So layout number 9 is a good one. Let me double check this one. Yeah, I like layout number 9 right there. Go ahead and delete this chart title and then label your axes. So just click that, highlight all of it, and let's go ahead and type in day of the week. And then over here, let's label this loaves of bread. Now we have a pretty good looking joint frequency distribution graph. So let's copy it. So I just right click, copy. You can also, as a shortcut, just make sure that it's highlighted and hit Control-C to copy. And then you want to go into your Excel assignment and just hit Control-V to paste. Make sure that when you paste it, all of the different types of bread are represented here, so I can identify which colors represent what kind of bread. So then you're going to answer a couple of questions about this, and that will be somewhat of a review from what we did in class. But just to show you how to walk through this, just keep in mind that this represents each day of the week, and then all of the frequencies across all 3 of these days in our data set for each type of bread are represented here. So just to run it down, you can see that there was less white bread sold than wheat bread on Sunday. A lot less multigrain bread sold than wheat bread on Sunday. And let's see, green sourdough was the least popular bread on Sunday, and so on and so forth. That's how you can interpret these here. So the next question has you creating a bar chart for percentage of white bread sold on each day. So just looking at white bread. Now every time that you create a new graph, you want to create a new tab down here, because since we pasted directly from this, if we start playing with this, it is going to change the table that's in the Word document, and we don't want that. And it's also nice to keep everything that you created within the same Excel spreadsheet. So let's go ahead and copy this. So I'm just going to right click, move or copy, and select create a copy, and then click OK. Now going back to the lab assignment, we are creating a pie chart for percentage of white bread sold. So I'm going to call this pie white. So right click, rename pie white. So now we've created another spreadsheet within this entire workbook, and this entire workbook is what will be saved when you save up here by File, Save As, and that's what you'll be turning in along with the Word document. Okay, so now we want a pie chart that's just looking at white bread. So click on this chart, make sure that you're clicking somewhere where that 4-cornered arrow is. Go up to Design, change Chart Type, and then go to the pie and select that first pie chart layout. Click OK. Well, this isn't good enough. Remember in class we discussed needing to have all the percentages represented. So the best way to have that happen is to select Layout 6. It tells you what are we looking at. Well, we're looking at white bread. It gives us the key over here, which color represents which day, and it presents the percentages as well. So just to break this down, across all 3 weeks of data collection, 19% of white bread loaves were sold on a Saturday. 10% of all white bread loaves sold were sold on a Sunday. 17% of all white bread sold over the course of the data collection was sold on a Monday, and so on and so forth. So let's go ahead, right-click, copy, and then I'm going to go ahead and move this to a new page. If you hold down Control and then hit Enter, it'll create an automatic page break, and then let's paste that in right there. Then you can answer these two questions based on this graph. Number 3, we're going to create a pie chart. It's much like this, only we're only going to be looking at wheat bread. So to do that, you go into Excel. So before we create the pie chart looking at wheat bread, let's go ahead and create a new worksheet or tab down here. So right-click, move or copy, create a copy, right-click, rename, let's call this pie wheat. Just staying organized and keeping track of what we are doing. All right, there's several ways that you can get this wheat bread pie chart. I'm going to just go ahead and go over here to the far right, move this up. So I just waited till the little four-cornered arrow or the four-arrowed plus sign pops up, click, hold it down, and drag up. Now we are looking at wheat bread. So let's go ahead and I'm going to hit Control-C to copy, go to my my Excel assignment, hit Control-V to paste. Now you can see we have two different pie charts. One is looking at what percentage of all white bread sales were on each day. This one's looking at what percentage of all wheat bread sales in the period of data collection were sold on each day. Now you can answer A and B for number 3. So for number 4, I want you to compare the type of information that's given in these pie charts to the type of information that's given in this bar chart, and make a decision and explain your decision for which one you think would be the most useful if you were the owner of Bread and Butter Bakery and you were trying to determine how much bread to stock on each day of the week. Now for number 5, I'm going to go ahead and hit Control and Enter to move this to another page. Now we're going to be creating a pie chart, but instead of just looking at one type of bread, we're going to be looking at one day of the week. Now the reason that we're limited to just looking at, one day of the week or one type of bread is that these all need to add up to 100%. So 100% of the wheat bread is represented by all the wheat bread sold in the entire data collection. All the Saturdays, all the Fridays, all the Thursdays, all the Wednesdays, Tuesdays, Mondays, and Sundays. So when you do a pie chart, you're limited to just looking at one single variable and the different percentages that make up all of, in this case, the wheat bread sales. All right, number 5. Let's create a pie chart for the percentage of each type of bread sold on Sundays. So now we'll have Sunday up here, and the different colors will represent different types of bread. Just like before we change anything in our graph, let's go ahead and copy. So right-click, move or copy, create a copy, and let's label this Pie Sunday. So right-click, rename, Pie Sunday. Well, now we can do something to easily reverse what we're looking at, where we want to have the different types of bread here and the day of the week here. So if you go to Design tab, select Switch Row/Column, now we're looking at different types of bread sold within one single day of the week. And I made this bigger again, just so that I had the full key represented here. And because I copied and worked with a copied graph, all the formatting that we did in these pie charts remain constant. We've still got our percentages here. So I'm going to go ahead, hit Control-C to copy, and then go into my Excel assignment and Control-V to paste. Now you can answer these questions here, looking at, for instance, we can tell that on Sunday, across all 3 Sundays, 22% of bread sales on Sunday were wheat, 22% of bread sales on Sundays were white, 18% of bread sales on Sunday were multigrain, so on and so forth. Now we need to create a pie chart looking at Saturday instead of Sunday. So let's go to Excel, right-click, move our copy, create a copy, OK, right-click, rename, and let's call this Pie Saturday. Now, because we are looking at the variable that represented the row labels originally, instead of moving things around in the values column, go ahead and go to day of the week down here, unclick select all, and just click on Saturday. Now we're looking at what percentage of all bread sales on Saturdays were wheat, what percentage of all bread sales on Saturday were white, and so on and so forth in this graph. So let's go ahead, Control C, and Control V to paste that into your assignment, and then you can answer the questions. Now, number 7 is very similar to the kind of conclusions you were asked to make in number 4. Just think about the difference between these pie charts and this bar chart, and how well would they be suited to help us make sales projections for Saturday versus Sunday. Now moving on to looking at means and standard deviations, and we're going to be looking at coefficients of variation as well. So moving away from graphical displays of data and into numeric measures of data. So there's a pretty easy way using pivot tables to get the mean for each different type of bread, mean number of sales. So I'm going to copy the bar chart graph where we were, because we're going to go back to working with this pivot table right here. So right-click, move our copy, create a copy, OK. So because I know I'm going to be using this spreadsheet to calculate mean, standard deviations, and coefficients of variation, I'm going to go ahead, right-click, rename. I'm going to name it M for mean, SD, standard deviation, and CB for coefficient of variation. It's always good to stay organized. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this bar chart. I don't need it anymore, and I've already got it here, and I've already got it in my assignment. So going back, got to find the mean sales per day for each type of bread. So instead of looking at sums here, I want to look at means. It's called averages in Excel. So to do that, you highlight all the data for one column. Make sure that you go up to right above the sum of white or the sum of wheat or whatever column you're looking at. Wait for that black arrow to appear, left click. Then you can go up to Options, Summarize Values By, and click Average. I'm going to just do that for all of these. Looking at the averages all the way across. Now, something else that I'm going to show you how to do is to automatically round these numbers to the thousandths place. So, if you just highlight all of the data, all the numbers at least, right-click, go to Format Cells, select Number, and then say we want to go out 3 decimal places to the thousandths place. Click OK. So as you'll see, I ask you to round typed answers to the thousandths place. Well, you don't even have to think about that now because you had Excel do that part for you. So just to break this data down, the total average across the entire data collection period of bread sales that were white bread sales, on average, they sold 610.429 loaves of white bread every single day. average of 538.190 loaves of wheat bread every single day. Now, remember I mentioned, if you have, in this case, we have nominal data, right? Nominal variables, at least, the type of bread and what day we're looking at. Then means can be somewhat inappropriate. And that's really because these represent whole things. You can't, well, you technically could have 1.5 loaves of bread, but you're not going to sell them broken up into fractions. However, sometimes we need to use the means, especially if we're using them as a frame of reference for variability. So from a purely descriptive level, the means aren't that great, but when we're looking at comparing it to the standard deviation, and also probably making sales projections like we're doing here, it's totally appropriate to use the means. Okay, so remember, you're being asked what is the mean sales per day for each type of bread. You'll just get that from here. This also breaks it down by day. So on Sundays, the mean sales for white bread were 430.667. So that may be a good estimate of how many loaves of white bread you would want to have in stock every Sunday. Okay. Then when we get to number 11, so you can answer these on your own, looking at the standard deviation for wheat bread and sourdough bread. So I am just going to keep on using the pivot tables for this, because maybe you want to find all the standard deviations when you are doing this on your own, if you're ever using statistics in the field. So I just want to show you how easy it is to find those using pivot tables. So again, we are looking for the standard deviation for wheat and sourdough. So we need to create 2 new columns here, one for wheat, one for sourdough, and then we'll tell Excel that we want to have the standard deviations displayed there. So click up here at wheat, click and drag down to the bottom of the values, and do the same for sourdough. Click and drag. Now the default value that's displayed is the sum. But remember, we don't really want the sum. We want now the standard deviations. So, sum of wheat, sum of sourdough, we're going to turn these into standard deviations. So let's go ahead, click up here, left click when the black arrow appears, go up to options, summarize values by, click on more options because standard deviation isn't here as a shortcut. Scroll all the way down and select STD DEV. Do not select this one with the P at the end because this is technically sample data, not a population. Okay, and there we go. Highlight this, actually do that. Summarize values, standard deviation, and there we go. So just to kind of look at this, on Sunday, and actually you can freeze the pane so that as you scroll over, this stays there. So if you go to page layout, view, okay, freeze pane, freeze first column. Boom. Now when we scroll over, we can see what day it is. So we can say, all right, well, on Sunday, the standard deviation of wheat bread sales was 50.163. If we were doing some comparisons, we could say that there are more consistent sales on Saturday than there are on Sunday because the standard deviation is lower. There's less of a spread of bread sales on Saturday, less differences across those 3 Saturdays than there are across those 3 Sundays in our data set. Also, overall, across all the days in our data set, the standard deviation of wheat is 103. The standard deviation of sourdough is 28.913. So that gives you those values that you need for number 12 and number 11. Then I want you to explain how you know which type of bread is more consistent based on the standard deviation. And then next, you're going to calculate the coefficients of variation for wheat bread and sourdough bread. Just a more refined measure of variability. I like to stay organized, so I'm going to go back over here, and I am going to write CV wheat and CV sourdough, just so that I can keep track of what I'm getting ready to calculate over here. So there's no fancy button for coefficient of variation. You'll have to input the formula using the values from Excel all on your own. But I'll show you how to do it. So to tell Excel that you're getting ready to put in a formula, you hit the equal sign. And then remember, the formula for the coefficient of variation is the standard deviation divided by the mean times 100. And we're looking for the coefficient of variation for the total wheat sales, overall wheat sales, not just for one specific day. So the standard deviation for wheat, so we'll put a little bracket there, a little left bracket. Standard deviation of wheat, just click on it. See, it just pops up there. Divided by the mean, or the average for wheat, close it in a bracket. So we're just telling Excel that we're doing this mathematical operation first. And then a star multiplied by 100. Now, that little star is on your keyboard if you hit Shift and 8. And most number pads on keyboards have a little star there as well. So then hit Enter, and that is our coefficient of variation for wheat bread. Now let's find it for sourdough. Equals, bracket, standard deviation for sourdough. Click on that. And the average, or the mean of sourdough, so little slash to divide, average of sourdough, another bracket, a star, multiply that by 100, and there are your coefficients of variation. Highlight those, right-click, go to Format Cells, click Number, 3 decimal places, and you've got them rounded to the thousands place. So those are the values that you'll need right here for these two. Now you will need to make some conclusions about how consistent sales are based on the coefficients of variation, and you should find that you have different conclusions for number 13 compared to number 16, and I want you to explain why that is.